The flight to England, San Francisco, mistaken for London, White Cliffs of Dover, and the Royal Taster. I can still feel the closed air of the airplane cabin when the family settled into their seats and the long journey began. Jethro took charge at once. He instructed everyone to remember the proper forms of address. Uncle Jed was to be called sire. Ordinary travelers were peasants. The seats beside them had been held for the royal oaf and his secretary, but those two would take a later flight because oafs were not permitted on this service. The explanations were delivered with calm authority. Max Baer Jr. made the authority look effortless. He had already moved into the new identity, and the airplane was simply another room in which the identity must be maintained. The first landing came sooner than expected. The family left the plane believing they had reached London. Jethro appointed himself guide and began to point out the famous sights. He showed them the Old English Channel right down yonder. He indicated the famous Old London Bridge. He directed their eyes to the White Cliffs of Dover and beyond them to the coast of France. A small place in the water was identified as one of the British Isles. The tour was given with complete confidence and with the wide gestures that always accompanied his largest ideas. I remember watching the sequence for the first time and feeling the laughter rise in stages as each wrong landmark was named with such certainty. The driver who had met them listened for a while, and then asked where they thought they were. Jethro answered that they were in London. The driver replied that they were in San Francisco. The landmarks were Alcatraz and El Cerrito and San Leandro. The correction landed with perfect comic weight. The family had not reached England at all. They had only reached the first stop on the scheduled flight. Jethro considered the information and decided they had overshot England and landed in Spain. The new theory was accepted with the same ease as the old one. The series never forced him to feel lasting embarrassment. He simply adjusted the map inside his mind and continued. The return to the airplane brought a different kind of comedy. The cabin crew prepared to serve the included dinners. Jethro rose and announced that he was the royal taster. No food could be given to His Highness or to the rest of the family until he had tasted it first. The stewardess accepted the claim with professional politeness and allowed him to begin. He worked his way through 12 steak dinners. The quantity was enormous and the pace was steady. By the time he finished, the crew and the passengers had taken full notice. Someone referred to him as the royal buzzard, the beast of Bugtussel, the creature that was going to eat England. The description was apt and affectionate. Max Baer Jr. played the tasting with physical commitment and without any signal that the appetite was unusual. The appetite was simply part of the character, and the character was simply being itself at 30,000 feet. Jed watched the tasting with the familiar mixture of patience and mild concern. He did not stop the performance. He only reminded the young man to sit down when the airplane began to move again. The reminder was practical. The larger acceptance of Jethro nature remained unchanged. Buddy Ebsen continued to supply the quiet center that allowed the broader comedy to orbit without flying apart. I have always depended on that center. It keeps the wilder moments from becoming chaotic, and it keeps the family feeling like a family even while one member consumes enough food for a dozen people. Ellie Mae and Granny occupied their seats with different degrees of patience. Ellie Mae was content to watch the new world pass by the windows. Granny remained alert for any fresh attempt to assign her a lower place in the order. The airplane did not revive the oaf conversation, yet the earlier resistance still lived in her posture. Irene Ryan kept the character consistent across every change of scene. She had not come this far in order to surrender ground. The geography error in San Francisco remains one of the purest comic constructions in the entire Inheritance story. The White Cliffs of Dover were ordinary California hills. The English Channel was the bay. The coast of France was the far shore of the same bay. Every name was wrong and every name was offered with absolute sincerity. The sincerity is what makes the sequence endure for me. Jethro was not trying to deceive anyone. He was trying to be helpful. He had studied 2 years of English in school, and he believed the study prepared him to recognize the landmarks of the real country. The distance between the study and the actual landscape produced the comedy. The series never needed to underline the distance. It simply placed the confident guide beside the real view and let the audience do the rest of the work. Air travel in the middle of the 1960s still carried a sense of occasion. Passenger jets were becoming common, yet the experience remained special for most families. The Clampetts treat the airplane as another strange room that must be adapted to their own rules. The royal taster is the adaptation of the moment. The same instinct that once produced the 5-second car wash now produces the systematic tasting of every tray. The instinct is consistent and therefore comforting. The young man continues to meet new situations by inventing a role that places him at the center of the action. The role is temporary, the instinct is permanent. When the airplane finally reaches the true destination, the relief is quiet and complete. The family has survived the false London and the 12 dinners and the ongoing project of titles. They walk out into England itself. The ground is solid under their feet for the first time since the journey began. Jethro is already looking ahead to the castle and to the armor he plans to wear. The rest of the family is simply glad to have arrived. The difference in focus is the same difference that has marked every stage of the story. One member lives in the imagined future, the others live in the practical present. Both ways of living remain necessary to the whole. I think often about the kindness of the cabin crew during the tasting. They did not stop him after the second or third tray. They allowed the performance to run its course. The allowance feels consistent with the larger tone of the series. Ordinary people who encounter the Clampetts are rarely cruel. They are confused and then curious and then willing to stand aside while the family finishes whatever project is underway. The pattern repeats from the bank to the passport office to the airplane. The pattern still strikes me as one of the gentlest features of the show. The false tour of San Francisco continues to live in my memory with special clarity. The pointing hand, the confident voice, the wrong names for the right landscape all combine into a complete comic world that lasts only a few minutes and yet feels whole. I have tried to explain the pleasure of the scene to people who never saw the original broadcast. The explanation always returns to the same element. The young man is not lost in the ordinary sense, he is perfectly oriented inside a map that does not match the ground. The mismatch is the joke and also the portrait of a mind that continues to build complete systems from incomplete information. The portrait is affectionate. The joke is inexhaustible. As the sequence closes, the family is at last on English soil. The long middle of the journey with its false landing and its enormous appetite is finished. The next complications wait at the customs desk and at the castle gates, yet the flight itself remains a complete chapter. It contains the titles and the tasting and the white cliffs that were never white cliffs. It contains the patience of Jed and the watchfulness of Granny and the open curiosity of Ellie Mae. All of those elements travel together inside the same metal tube and then step out together into the new country. I leave the chapter with the same warmth I have felt at every previous ending. The family has moved again and they have remained themselves while moving. The combination continues to feel like the central achievement of the entire series.